Welcome to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where in every episode we explore what is research culture and what should it be. You'll hear thoughts and opinions from a range of contributors to help you change research culture into what you want it to be.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. My name is Jed Hall and I'm an academic development consultant for research impact at the University of Leeds. Although the episodes I contribute to the podcast focus on some aspect of research impact, so have a look in the show notes for that playlist. But today I'm actually expanding my remit and looking at the whole research management and administration ecosystem, or RMA. One reason for that is that Ruth Winden, one of my co-hosts, and I have been working on provision to support the career development of colleagues within that ecosystem at Leeds. We've come up with a longitudinal programme called Research Professionals Careers Conversations, and we've also delivering our inaugural Careers Day for research professionals. Now that day will be in full swing if you're listening to this episode on the day it's released, which is the 7th of May 2025. Ruth and I will be chatting about the programme and the Careers Day in an upcoming episode that we'll release in July, so please subscribe so that you don't miss that. But to help me to get to grips with this RMA ecosystem, I'm chatting to Dr. Simon Kerridge. Simon runs Kerridge Research Consulting, which specialises in this field. His expertise comes from over 30 years of working in RMA, latterly as the Director of Research Services at the University of Kent in the UK. He is also a board member of the European Association of Research Managers and Administrators, or EARMA, and he has been chair of the UK's Association of Research Managers and Administrators. He's got a passion to drive the development of the profession across the world and has been involved in projects such as the International Network of Research Management Societies, or INORMS, Research Administration as a Profession, RAP Task Force, which he leads. This work has led to the production of the Emerald Handbook of Research Management and Administration around the world, which is absolutely, truly the magnum opus of the profession, with 127 contributors from over 50 countries, and every single chapter is available online for free. Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we dive into the book, as your regular LinkedIn posts about it call it, I really wanted to know how are the dogs, because you always bring them into every presentation I've ever seen.
Well, the dogs are kind of fine. However, we've had a sort of expansion. So, as you know, 4 dogs, which usually make appearances on my presentation, and unfortunately not in the room today, so they probably won't make an appearance on the podcast. Our son, who was living with us during COVID, has 3 dogs, and he's now moved out to live with his girlfriend. She has 2 cats, and the dogs and the cats don't get on too well, so we have now retained his 3. So we have a gaggle of 7 dogs, and they don't necessarily all get on with each other. So it's a bit like a French farce at feeding time or whatever. You sort of open one door and the 3 dogs run this way to that room, and then you close that door and then one's run this way, and we're in this routine now, so they all know where they go at what time, but it's hilarious.
Well, maybe we should have that recording sometime, or maybe put it out as a kind of bonus episode. That would be lovely.
It could be a meme of some sort, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, I thought I had my hands full with 1 nutter, but I think 7. Yeah.
Yes, the unmagnificent 7.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess we really ought to get back onto the topic. If we must, rather than just talk about dogs. Let's hope none of our other outside passions overlap, because
Well, indeed. But I suppose, actually, just while we're still on the subject of dogs, I don't know if you have seen the actual hardback version of the book, or indeed the front cover has dogs on it.
Ah, so they have got in there. Right.
They have,
Excellent.
yes.
Excellent. Right. So we're keeping people on tenterhooks. So the book. Tell me about the process of pulling it together. So, interestingly, tell us about the book, which I think, giving you that 60 seconds to try and summarize 81 chapters. The book is absolutely gargantuan. Tell us about the people involved and the joys and challenges of pulling it all together. And the reason I'm really interested in that is really what you learned from the process, because I was co-editor of a book many years ago, and that only had 27 chapters and 32 contributors. But I really think it's one of the reasons why I'm now bald.
I wasn't going to say anything. So this could well be a toupee. You don't know, do you?
Yeah, that's true. So go on, tell us about the book.
Well, of course, it kind of happened by accident. I was at the NAMA conference, the Norwegian Association of Research Managers and Administrators, it was February 2020, just before, and also that as one of the invited speakers was Susie Polly from University of Bologna. Also a big sort of EARMA person. She's written a few articles and so on. And she was chatting with someone who had reached out to her, Mariko Yoshihara Yang from Stanford, who had come over for that. And now she's sort of mainly a kind of educational researcher, but has an interest in the sort of penumbra of things around everything to do with education. So, and she'd done a little bit of work on research managers in Switzerland. Not obvious why. She's sort of Japanese by descent and working in America, so I'm not quite sure. And I've never really asked her. That's terrible, isn't it? How she ended up doing this piece of research in Switzerland. Anyway, so the three of us got talking at a coffee break, and we all had similar sort of overlapping interests. Mariko was very interested in research managers and administrators who had been researchers, so that kind of move, from sort of the rationale for that, and so particularly those with PhDs. Susie generally interested in research management, more broadly, and sort of higher education management. And me, I was kind of sitting at that point on the data from the second RAP survey, Research Administration as a Profession, which we can talk more about or not, or I'm sure everybody knows all about it. And we're kind of like, if we put all these three things together, we could write an interesting paper. Then sort of COVID happened. We sort of had these conversations over Zoom every couple of weeks and trying to get the focus of the paper down. And it sort of turned into 2 papers and 3. And then Susie said, look, we've got loads here. Why don't we just write a book? And Mariko and I looked at each other and thought, well, that's the most stupid thing we've ever heard. What, a book? What are you talking about? And now, Susie had previously been the editor of another book, Research Management Europe and Beyond, so she kind of knew what she was letting herself in for, I guess. I don't know. And Mariko and I just, oh, yeah, fine, okay, whatever. And so that's kind of how it happened, sort of by accident. So I guess we started talking about potentially writing a paper together in February, and by about September-ish, we'd sort of agreed to write a book, and then it went through the process of okay, well, I'm very much open access. For me, everything I do has to be open access, freely available, because nobody would pay to read anything I'd write, but also for obvious research culture reasons. And so it was, okay, well, if we're going to write a book and it's open access, well, that means that we either need to self-publish or get someone to pay for the book, the sort of the BPC, the book processing charge. So we kind of reached out to a few potential publishers to find out, A, would they do such a thing, and B, how much it would cost. And I'd sort of previously done some things with Emerald. They'd been sponsors for ARMA conferences and so on. And so I reached out and they said, well, yeah, and we had the conversation, and we worked out then what the price would be. And really, that sounds like quite a lot. And we had a bit of negotiation about how fantastic it would be, and how this book was bound to put Emerald on the map. Yeah. Anyway, or the other way around. But anyway, we thought, okay, so we got this price of quite a few thousands of euros, and we said to ourselves, well, why don't we just ask these various national associations around the world if they'd like to sponsor it? And some of them did. So we said, fantastic. Thank you very much. It ended up, we got the bulk of the sponsorship from EARMA, the European Association. We also got funding from DARMA, the Danish Association, from ARMA NL, the Dutch Association, and from Fortrama, the German Association. So put those bits together, promised we'd send Emerald the money, and then the very short process of putting the book together then ensued. And yeah, I mean, we had to do a proposal and say roughly what was going to be in it, and that proposal was peer reviewed to see if anybody actually might be interested in reading it. Yeah, and so that's kind of how it started. And I've just started talking drivel, and I didn't know how much you wanted. Sorry.
So go into, so that's an interesting starting point. But yeah, tell us like the overview, the aims. What went into that proposal.
Yeah, so we basically, again, with three kind of main editors, we sort of knew the things that we definitely wanted to have in it. So Mariko was very keen on having this sort of, that sort of PhD type focus, and for it to have academic content. I was very keen for it to have, well, kind of what is research management, what's the state of play research management, and the kind of the around the world bit, and trying to get people to actually use the RAP data to sort of contextualize how research management worked in different countries. And Susie was kind of a bit between the two, and interested in both sides. So we ended up sort of dividing the book into a number of sections, and there was broadly the kind of academic and professional sections, which are the first lot, and then the second section of the book is very much a kind of chapter per country or region about what is the state of research management in that region, kind of what does it look like, and what are the pressures, and what's the sort of potential future. So we very much got the state of the art bits, but also the kind of what is the profession, the identity, professionalism, how's it fitting with other history and so on. So it's sort of, I liked Opus Magnus, I like that. Does kind of suggest that I should never write anything again, though, doesn't it? So yeah, that was the plan, and then we kind of started thinking, well, we could have a chapter on this, chapter on that. We might need some other people to write some content. How do we find them? So we had quite a big network, but we also reached out to the various associations saying, anybody want to write something about your country? And then we realized, we're going to have, as you say, 81 chapters, probably only about 75, 76 substantive chapters, because there's kind of the introduction and stuff, but that's still quite a lot of work. And as you say, 127 contributors. I mean, that included us, so it was only really 120 or so that weren't us, and that's when we came up with this idea of regional editors who we could not have done it without. So basically we kind of split it up into, well, we call them regional editors, but there were also, some of them were sort of kind of subject area editors. So there was sort of the history ones and so on. So we had 7 people from around the world who kind of joined us, and they did the bulk of the work. And by work, I mean chasing the authors, reminding them, telling them, it's nothing right, and sourcing them and finding them and so on. And I don't know if they all know this, but the book cover is a mountain with 3 mountaineers going up, and the 3 mountaineers potentially represent the 3 editors, and there are 7 dogs helping the mountaineers, and there are 7 regional editors, and perhaps that's all I need to say, but that just shows how much we love the regional editors, because of course dogs are our favorite creatures.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like an amazing collaborative process, which can bring its amazing joys and amazing challenges. And I'm sure that there were things along the way that probably fell into both of those categories, and lots of them.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned identity in that, and that was something I'm interested in for the second question. So there are really many roles and identities that make up the research managers and administrators, or RMA. I'm going to drop to the acronym from now on, in terms of the profession. So can you now? I've never joined any of the associations that you mentioned. So, the obvious one.
Because you're a maverick.
Possibly because I'm a maverick. But I think that's more because I often saw, and this might be completely incorrect on my part, I often saw that process as being the get the money in, get the money managed, get the outputs delivered, essentially. So that kind of pipeline of the research process. So, I know in our prep for this interview, you were going, no, you are absolutely, whatever you are part of this kind of really broad ecosystem. So can you tell the listeners kind of what's your conception of RMA and how broad is it?
Okay, so yeah, I guess I'll fall back. There are a number of definitions, and they're all a little bit loosey-goosey or two-scope, and so they don't quite fit. One of my favorite ones was one that the ACU put together, which was along the lines of anything and everything that is done to support the research process. I think their definition actually said in the university environment, but I would certainly broaden that out because research is done in other places. But also, I would include people who are supporting research in funding organisations as well. So sort of like our counterparts, if you like. But yes, so you would definitely say kind of pre-award, post-award, as you've kind of described it. They would be, if you like, the core of the RMA profession. You've then got the kind of all the outputty type stuff, the sort of scholarly communication, if you like, and that's where there's a definite overlap with the sort of the library profession. But you've then got sort of associated areas. So when we did the RAP surveys, we asked people what areas they worked in. One of them was, well, do you work in supporting research students? So in the UK, most universities will have a separate graduate school, and those people are sometimes perhaps more aligned with Vitae, but some of them are perhaps also aligned with RMA, and maybe there's an overlap, and is the graduate school actually part of the research office? And so there's a sort of an overlap there, and probably about 30-40% of people across the world who responded to the research administration as a profession survey said that they included in their area that area of work. You then also got the sort of the area that you would perhaps cover as sort of training and communication, so that internal researcher development, and I would certainly see that as being very core too. So to me, in more recent surveys, we've asked about three areas, which are the kind of the researcher development, the pre-award, and the post-award as being the three sort of main areas. If you wanted to have it as kind of three, much easier for graphs than 8 areas. So yeah, you'd also have translation, technology transfer, knowledge exchange, whatever you want to call it. And again, in the UK, that's very much the sort of the oral remit. But if you go to places like Africa and South America, then that's very much, they don't call it research management administration, they call it research and innovation management. So the two things are very much tied together. It's just a continuum, and that's the way they have things organized there. So it's kind of changes kind of a little bit. When we ask people, what do you identify as, most people would say research manager and administrator in the UK. No, that's a lie. I don't mean most. I mean the largest. When we gave them 10 options, including the other, about 25-30% said. So the highest number of respondents said research manager administrator, but everything else was also covered. You go to the US, research administrator. Now, research administrator is actually a term in the US. It's sort of recognized by the federal government and so on. But even in the US, only 40% of people identified as a research administrator, a lot would identify as something else, maybe a research manager or a research advisor, so all sorts of different phrases. And research advisor is what they call it in Scandinavia. So there's a real sort of problem with the definition, with the scope. And I'm now trying to remember what the original question was. Yes, that was it. Are you a research manager administrator? If you think you are, then you are. If you don't think you are, you just don't realize yet. That might be the way of putting it. And I suppose it depends. Sorry, just going back to the US example, there are two big associations of research administrators, but there's also a separate association for research and development. So there's the NORDUP. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't.
National Organisation for Research Development Professionals, which was actually a spin-off from one of the other associations, because those people felt that they weren't really being served because everything was focused on the pre-award and the post-award. So it's kind of like a sort of a splinter group. I guess in the same way as PRISM has sort of grown up in the UK, it's sort of, to me, we're all research managers, administrators, but if they felt they weren't being served by ARMA, it wasn't really their place, then they needed their own place. And these spin-offs happen and then sometimes get reabsorbed and so on. So we shall see. So it's fluid.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like it's definitely not as, coming back to dogs, as kind of fixed as packs, but much more kind of able to kind of absorb another pack, because you essentially in your house have two packs that you are managing, and we're in our kind of tribalism. I think we can cope with being with a tribe, or sometimes we can not and pop out.
Yes, that's very nice, and I do like that example, because one of the dogs from the pack of 3 actually gets on with the pack of 4, so he kind of gets the best of both worlds, because he can come into where the humans are, with either set. So he goes really well, and I think that's probably a good example for professional development. Is if you're involved in 2 or 3 different networks, then you get benefit from all of them. I just want to throw one other acronym at you, which is Professionals at the Interface of Science, which is it's a Portuguese grouping. In fact, their national association is called PIC, which is more or less translated for the platform for professionals at the interface of science, and kind of by science they mean research, so it's this scientum type. So and I quite like that, professionals at the interface of, because it's sort of kind of shows you actually don't need to be in a university. It's just anyone who is around but not actually directly doing the research.
Yeah, lovely. Now, because of that complexity that you've just sketched out, there's a lot of thinking at the moment, certainly in the UK and UK universities, really looking at what's that career pathway. Mm-hmm. And actually, when you're talking about so many different almost professional competencies that we're talking about in that ecosystem, it's quite challenging to think that through. But so what's your view in terms of how might we see that career pathway agenda being taken forward in RMA over the medium term?
Okay, that's a great question, but one which I'm going to defer slightly, because there was something I meant to say on the previous one, so I'm going to jump back in. And you can do a fantastic edit, or just make me seem stupid and continue the flow. That's probably the way to go. Just going back to the identity, there is a wonderful new tool, and yes, I was involved in developing it, which looks at sort of values, motivations. It's called the RAPIDS tool, Research Administrators Professional Identity Tool, and it's a questionnaire which you fill in, and you say what areas you work in, so there's a bit of sort of demographic stuff there, but it really is to do with values, motivations and skills. We had about 1,095 people respond to the initial survey, so we've now got a really nice sort of baseline data. So as an individual you can now fill it in, and then you get presented with the graphs afterwards, so sort of radar graphs of here are your values and motivations compared with the ones for a typical research manager and administrator. So if you look at that and you perhaps try it out and see if you fall within the green area. And if you do, maybe that might mean that you're very suited to be a research manager administrator and might actually be one. So, I mean, if you just look for, oh dear, RAPIDS, it's not a great acronym, is it? We can do links and stuff afterwards.
We can put links in the show notes.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
Absolutely.
So anyway, sorry, career pathways, I think, is the question that you really wanted to answer. Yes. Okay, so given that we start off with not really knowing exactly what we do anyway, or how to describe it, having a career pathway is really difficult from there. So again, the US is probably a good example. Kind of profession's been around for 60 odd years, and certain states do have sort of definitions for and pay scales for kind of research administrator 1, research administrator 2, senior research administrator, different terms in different states, of course, and so those kind of things do exist. You kind of get them sort of in some universities in the UK, but they're kind of usually developed centrally by the research office as a kind of, yes, you join as a sort of a research administrator. I was going to say research assistant, getting confused there. Research administrator, and you then might do, sort of develop your skills and then get a team of people. Maybe that means you're then a research manager, or but there's no clear progression. Again, they've got the same issue in Italy, where there is no definition on, again, all university jobs are kind of civil service jobs in Italy, and so you have to have a definition of what the role is, and then you can produce a scale, and those just don't exist at the moment. So the Italian Association are trying to sort of work on that, but of course it's a long process. So I'm wondering whether there should be some sort of concerted effort in the UK. I mean, I know Armour did some work probably 8 or 10 years ago in creating this sort of certification program, but that doesn't really help with a career as such, because whether you've got a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD doesn't relate to directly where you are in a career. But the other thing that's worth, I guess, looking at is the RM roadmap project, which is EU funded project. I don't know how long it's going to go, probably 2 years, 18 months, which is defining research administration in mainland Europe these days, I guess, and it's defining that on 4 levels to kind of mirror the Researcher 1, 2, 3, 4 that they have in all the various European Commission documents, and so you can then build a kind of a framework on top of that. So it could well be worth looking at that as a basis for any institution like your own who's considering putting that together. So but it's not a done deal yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the projects that's going on at the moment. In fact, the career pathways is covering both academic and non-academic.
What a lovely phrase that is.
I know.
Do we call our academic follies, do we call them non-professional because we're professional staff? I tried that once, didn't work.
Yes, how to win friends and influence people.
Exactly.
I was trying to avoid saying it, but it's just so easy to try and slip into the they're over there and we're over here kind of mentality. But we're trying to do some work on that. So that's something I'll be, it's being led out of where I work in the university, reports into the people and culture directorate. So it's being led within the same directorate as me. So I'll definitely see if we can get some of that information for RM roadmap into that thinking. But it is a challenge. I mean, one thing that kind of does strike me is that, from my time in industry, before I came into higher education, after 10 years working in industry, is that academic promotions are a complete outlier. They're a complete that's a completely different way of managing a career than
Yes,
almost anywhere else.
absolutely.
So
There is no vacancy, but it doesn't matter. You can still be promoted.
yes, absolutely. And I think that's something that perhaps, the RMA profession within a university maybe ought to be going, perhaps this is just normal. And actually, there is a career pathway if I, as an individual, work out where it is I want to go and how I want to get there. And from my time as a head of careers, that's definitely the advice I would have been giving back in that period. But it can sometimes feel a bit challenging to individuals.
I mean, certainly one of the things that on those sort of motivations at scale is that sort of working in uncertainty, and so that is something which, if you're happy with, then research management is suited for you. But I do then wonder, for those people who are research managers who are not that keen on that particular aspect, wouldn't it be nice if there was a very clear framework for them, just like you get in accountancy or whatever, where yes, if you do these sorts of exams, you'll get that, and then you are then eligible to have this thing here, and sometimes even you just get paid more because you're more qualified, even if you're doing the same role.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll jump to that question next, actually, because it was one I was also interested in when we were doing the prep around this. So, you've mentioned iNorms. That has around 20 national and regional members in that international community of networks.
Yes.
And how do you see those organisations growing and changing over the years? Do you see them maybe becoming a bit more stronger in terms of professional bodies like accountancy, like engineering, like the medical professions, and maybe them providing that kind of accreditation and kind of, more detailed CPD than potentially they offer at the moment?
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So yes, so what do we have? We have in the US, there is the Research Administration Certification Council, which is sort of endorsed by spin-off from the two associations that I don't know if I actually named or not, NCURA and SRAI. So you can become a certified research administrator. There are also a certification specifically for pre-award and for post-award financial. So you can get those certifications. They're very much exam based, and they're the sort of certifications which you need to keep up a certain amount of CPD in order to keep that within sort of a 5-year period. So that's kind of okay, but I guess the European approach is a bit more exams. Well, how about portfolio evidence based? So the ARMA certifications, the CRA and the CRM and the CRLM as were. So that's, administrator, manager, leader in research management. I guess it was about 10 years ago or so they were created. They're currently being revamped, so I'm not quite sure what the new ones are going to look like. And it's quite interesting because that ARMA framework was used in Europe, and the European Association has been running those, but is now also looking to revamp it. And they're also have a new project sort of following on from RM roadmap called RM framework, which is actually looking at all of the training provision that's around and sort of giving maybe sort of quality badges for that. So trying to build together a kind of a training framework. It was also used in Canada by the Canadian Association, CARA, for their Canadian equivalent of the CRM, but they've also now moved away from that original sort of ARMA framework, and they now have a cooperation with Mohawk College, and so you get an actual accredited thing by an educational provider rather than sort of the professional one, if you like. The Australasian Association Arms, they have a sort of similar portfolio training type one, but that's entirely self-certified. So it's self-certified by the association, but they do have on their kind of advisory board various people who are high up in government and their funders and so on, and so that certification is worth something because of the people who endorse it. I think the one I like most is in Southern Africa. They have the IPRC, which is sort of associated with SARIMA, the Southern African Research and Innovation Management Society, but again separate from. But it's very much, although it's sort of African based, it's very much international advisory boards and so on. So this kind of I can see developments happening in all of those places. There are also a couple of master's programs, mainly in the US, although I think there are some in Germany. But they tend to be more sort of project management with research management rather than specifically research management. But there's a little bit of work going on in the US at the moment about undergraduate courses in research management, or research administration as they would call it. So that's a very interesting development, because when you grow up and you think, yes, do I want to be a ballet dancer? Do I want to be a rocket scientist? Do I want to be a research manager? The research management thing doesn't really exist in people's minds because you don't see it. There's also no degree course you could do in it. The other thing that's worth looking at, if people don't know about it, is again, it was a European project called Formation, FO capital RMA. Very nice, which developed some electives for undergraduate courses, so additional modules which undergraduates could do, and all the materials for that are available online. So if you look for Formation, again, it's not a great word, Formation, look for Formation EU, and you would find those. So again, for anyone interested in kind of sort of that undergraduate level. So for me, I would love to see an undergraduate course in research management and administration, and I think that's what we will see, but probably not before I fully retire.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating. As you were describing that, it almost felt like an innovation system, and we're just waiting to see which idea is actually strongest, aren't we?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. That's so. In other words, keep watching and see which one.
Watch this space. Yes.
Yeah, takes off. So coming back to, what was going to be one of my earlier questions. So one of the early chapters in the book talked about the gender balance in RMA roles. And in regions where the profession is more established, such as Western Europe, there were more females in that range of roles, but a skew towards males in more senior roles, not unlike a lot of professions, unfortunately. So what actions do you want to see taken in this area, and how important are they with the recent kind of rollback of equality, diversity and inclusion in the US that you've been talking about a lot?
So yes, the gender skewness is internationally average about 78-80% RMAs identify as female. It's about 83-84% in the US, 80% here, 77 whatever across most European countries. In South America, or at least specifically in Colombia, where we have sufficient data, and in most of Africa, it's closer to 50-50. Also closer to 50-50 in Japan as well. But it's also relatively new in Japan. There was some sort of funding put in to create research offices, probably about 7 years ago now. So yes, it's a very interesting, why is it that way? Is it because it's a service profession, a support profession? And I don't want to do this analogy, but I'm going to do the analogy. We have maybe doctors doing surgery and people helping them doing surgery who might be called nurses, and I don't know what the gender split is, but I imagine it could be something very similar. So is that sort of somehow analogous? And I don't want to put any words in people's mouths, but maybe it's to do with the kind of the type of person that you are. Again, going back to that sort of Rapids survey, are we the sort of people that are attracted to this sort of role because it's supportive, doing things for the greater good, but also being a little bit more flexible with your time, maybe. So maybe it's a bit more family friendly. I'm sure most people will say it isn't. It's also a very highly stressful profession. There's some great surveys on that done by Jennifer Shambrook. So maybe there is a sort of person that is attracted to that. Sort of my feeling is maybe in places where it's a newer profession, probably, and this is definitely true in Africa, a lot of people who are research managers have very recently been researchers, or more likely are actually still researchers at the moment, and they're just having to pick up the research management role because there isn't a research office. And in general, researchers, gender balance tends to be, certainly in the sciences, a little bit more male oriented than female oriented, and that's where there are more researchers, and so maybe that's why the balance is closer to 50-50. Just to pick you up on one point, you are correct that for the senior roles that balance is not as skewed. So thinking back to that first RAP data set, it was, I say, about 80% for the UK data overall as being female, and when you came to the leadership roles, it was closer to 70%. So there is still that sort of glass ceiling, but it's not a hugely thick glass ceiling. It's not like it drops down to 20% or anything. I'm not saying that's great, but yeah. But the most recent survey, the RAP3 survey, there was only about 2 percentage points difference. So perhaps the things that needed to be done have been done, or maybe that's an outlier. And when we do the RAP4 survey later this year, maybe it will be the other way again, or perhaps we'll have a higher proportion of female leaders in research management than the average. That would be lovely, but I'm sure it won't be the case.
Yeah, it would be lovely to keep our eye on that over the when does RAP4?
Well, we do them every 3 years, so it has to be sometime this year. We were hoping to apply for some US funding, but US, yeah, indeed. So we've been sort of holding off on doing that so that we could get the funding to do the survey. That's not going to happen. So we'll probably be running the survey something like May, June, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the retirement word, and I'm hoping in the next 3.5 years that will be the end of my career as a.
So early retirement at 50?
I wish. No, early retirement at 60. So yeah, next 3 years or so. So in terms of that kind of timeline, or maybe a little bit longer, what are your hopes really for the profession? If you can crystallize it into something, this is Simon's view of the perfect RMA world.
Wow. Okay. Well, the first thing is it would be recognized, and I think sometimes people like yourself who are doing research management perhaps don't realize that they are. So, or identify as something other, and that's fine, but probably, yeah, and I'm sure you feel like you're part of the whole overall research infrastructure, but maybe having a sort of better understanding of where you fit, having people like HR understand what we do so that we can be included in frameworks and career development frameworks and so on. Having our bosses know what we do. If we work in a research office, then that's fine, because probably our boss does know what we do in the research office. Unless, of course, it's the director of research, and depending on where they report, then they may not really know what we do. If we work for Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research, they probably have a good idea. Maybe if we work for the director of finance, maybe not quite so much. So yeah, all sorts of aspersions being cast there, and apologies to anyone who fully understands what we do. For our families to know what we do, that would be quite nice. It's quite difficult to articulate sometimes because it's something different every day, which is why it's such a great profession, because you never know what's coming. And if you like a little bit of excitement and variety, then it's definitely for you. If you like doing the same thing every day, probably work on a car production line. So that sort of recognition, it would be absolutely fabulous to have an undergraduate course. somewhere, that would be great. And I would like to see more research on research management. There is a current initiative at the moment called Research on Research Management and Administration, which is being looked at by EARMA, and if all goes well, will hopefully be launched at the forthcoming INORMS conference in May in Madrid, where we're just trying to pull together researcher practitioners, sort of like myself, but also people who are proper researchers, get paid to do research, who are researching research management, or would like to do research in research management. So, like Mariko from Stanford, for example. So, trying to pull all these people, together to create a bit more of an interest, because it's really an under-researched area. I mean, I mentioned, obviously we're talking about my book. That's a bit much, isn't it? The book I was involved in. The other one that Susie was involved in, there's really only one other book, Research Administration Management, which is very much US focused, which came out I think 2016, something like that. No, 2006. Goodness me. And there are, I think, 4 journals which are sort of focused on research management, administration, research governance, and that's really it. But so trying to bring all those things together would be great. So actually having it as a recognised research area, whenever I submit a paper to the academic repository or whatever, I can't tick the appropriate place for it because it doesn't really exist. So yeah, so that would be nice. And wouldn't it be fantastic to have a recognised career framework? Wouldn't that be great? It's not much to ask for 3 years, is it?
No, it's not. I'll crack on.
If you can retire at maybe 80, then it might be possible.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going that far. Right. Simon, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. But one final question, if I may, which is this I'm kind of landing on you. We haven't prepared this because I want to just get your initial reaction.
42.
42, is it? Yeah. Okay. That's your research impact hero, is it?
Of course, everyone loves Douglas Adams, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was to ask you for one name or 2 names in terms of that, who you might want to see interviewed on that playlist series,
on the playlist of heroes,
research impact heroes.
Impact heroes. Okay. Yeah, well, obviously Julie Bailey, David Phipps, research impact. Sarah DeRica would be nice. Who else specifically for research impact? Well, you only said 1 or 2 names, didn't you? I've come up with 3. So
you have.
Okay.
Yeah. And why them?
Well, Julie is the impact queen. Of course, she's written a lovely book on research impact, or rather supporting research impact. David Phipps, I guess he must be the research impact king, I guess. So he's based at York University, not the University of York, but York University in Canada, unless I've got those the other wrong way round. But anyway,
I think that's right.
Yes. And he's done a whole load of work on research impact, and has had funding from the NSF to do that when the NSF were giving out funding. He's quite often over in the UK as well, but of course you'd be doing as a Teams call, so that would be no problem. Also David's very funny as well, or rather he laughs at my jokes. That's not necessarily the same thing, is it? Yes, so Sarah DeRica very much on the academic side of things, and would give you probably a different view on research impact. She's done a lot of work on sort of citation-based analyses and those sorts of things, but her interests are a lot broader. So I'm not sure she was co-director of, but CWTS at Leiden, but she's now running a large European ERC as well. Running it, So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for those suggestions. I mean, the email has gone out to Julie. I've not had a response yet, Julie.
Well, have you got her most recent email address?
Well, I went for a private one because
Okay.
that hopefully shouldn't have changed.
Yes. Okay. But does she
Yes.
have the Jed spam box? That might be the thing.
Maybe that's what it was. Oh God, him again. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, probably
Well,
actually.
just prod her again.
I will. I'll prod her on LinkedIn. I love doing a bit of LinkedIn stalking. Right. Well, Simon, thanks for those suggestions, and I'll try and make them all happen for you so that there's some content coming out on the podcast that you'd want to listen to. And I'll leave it to you to say goodbye to the listeners.
Well, in that case, goodbye to the listeners, I guess. I was thinking about throwing in a joke, but I thought I'd better not. So I will just say it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from the girls. That's the dogs, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Jed.
Thanks for listening to the Research Culture Uncovered podcast. Please subscribe so you never miss out on our brand new episodes. And if you're enjoying the discussions, give us some love by dropping a 5-star rating and written review, as it helps other research culturists find us. And please share with a friend and show them how to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and here's to you and your research culture.